Hi, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Sustainability in the Sea, a podcast for ocean people hosted and produced by the Conservationist Collective. I am just like feeling so calm after editing and producing this episode because this conversation is probably one of the best ones that I have had in my life. Being able to sit people that you look up to down and ask them the questions you've always had is always something that I think kind of hits different. So let me just set the stage. For those of you that haven't heard of the blue mind theory is research backed science and understanding about the ways that water can improve your mental health, your well being, the ways that it can improve your mood. And the blue mind theory, in addition to blue mind theory, there's also blue mind philosophy and all of these things. And so the Blue Mind Theory as a book, which I've linked in the show notes, was written by marine biologist and conservationist Dr. Nichols. And he, we sit him down today and talk all about the Blue Mind Theory. And this will be coming out in the first part of February 2023, and I will have completed 31 days of my own personal Blue Mind challenge that I did for the entire month of January, where I spent time with the ocean, on the ocean, or underwater every day for the entire month. And you'll hear me reference that in the interview. But I've learned so much in this process and documented it all in short form through TikTok and then by week on our YouTube, which I'll also link in the show notes. So if you have extra curiosity after this conversation about what this looks like on a personal level, check those out. And I would really, really highly recommend his book and other podcasts that he's been on. So let's get into it. I hope you learned so much. And thanks for listening to Sustainability in the Sea. Welcome, Jay, to Sustainability in the Sea.
Hey, how you doing? Good to hang out with you and talk ocean.
Yeah, talk ocean. It's always a good day when you get to talk ocean with fellow ocean lovers. Where are you joining us from?
Well, I am in the middle of the Mojave Desert on my way back home, got a cross country trip, and it's sort of strange. I feel like I'm in like a Mad Max movie at a literally blown out gas station in the middle of the desert. So it's like the actual opposite of the ocean and the topic of blue mind. So extremely opposite of water where I am right now, the Mojave Desert. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us from the Mojave Desert then.
Yeah.
So I have heard Blue Mind be thrown around so many different ways over the past few years. It's really grown in understanding from the general public. Is that kind of what you found too? Has it been like a upward trend, or at some point did it just kind of start increasing exponentially?
Yeah, it's been a pretty steady kind of growth curve. And I think especially in the last few years with all of the stress that people are under going through the pandemic and other global issues, its utility as the concept works for them personally. And so that's definitely has led to increase awareness of the idea. So you look at it over the past decade, and I think your observation is spot on. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to your relationship with water, was there like a formative experience during your, like, where did you grow up? Did you grow up near water? And was there something that kind of shaped you where you maybe had an aha moment, or was it like a series of things that kind of got you to this, I guess, journey?
Yeah, I can look back and say that I was, in terms of water, very privileged. I kind of learned to swim at a young age, and then it was just game on, and in all forms. So pools and beaches and lakes, and fishing and swimming and diving, surfing and boating. Um, not in a fancy way, just in a very you know regular way. Uh, and so it's more recently that I've realized how really awesome and fortunate that is, and that not everybody has that experience. And And also that drives, I think that drives the work, because I've met so many people that never learned to swim and as a result feel disconnected from the blue parts of the planet, and which is most of the planet. And so the challenge is, how do we solve for that? How do
Mhm.
we make um, access for all, make blue mind common knowledge and common practice? And that's really the driver. But for me, I guess I look thinking back on my childhood, I was a pretty shy kid. Um, I was adopted. I had big questions about who I was, where I was from. Um, People refer to kids like that as introverts now, and it's not so much of a stigma. It's sort of a badge of honor for some people, but back then it wasn't really thought of that way. I was like, "Why are you so shy? What's wrong with you?" But in the water, I just felt better. Anytime I got underwater, life was better. I was quieter. I stuttered on land. I'd never stuttered underwater because you can't. You don't get to talk underwater, and people don't ask you questions. Um, and so I kind of had that, I guess, the therapeutic benefit early on. I didn't connect the dots on the science, of course, as I was a kid, but I knew I felt better. I knew that was my happy place. And then became a marine biologist because I wanted to do work that aligned with that happy
Mhm.
place. And then recognize that, there are people like us all over the place that agree with that sentiment, that feeling. Um, and I wanted to learn more about the science of what we now call blue mind. So that's kind of how it began, kind of out of a personal insight that led to my career and
Mhm.
my lifelong passion. And that's really what led to writing a book about it and doing more research about it. That's the short, quick version of it.
It feels like everyone that we interview about on this podcast specifically has this. It might not be like many experiences when they're younger, but at least one that either really excited them or taught them something about themselves. It could have been in the water, it could have been at an aquarium or something like that. And then they kind of just ran with it and were brave enough to run with it. And so, since a lot of the folks that listen are interested in making marine conservation, marine science, and marine biology a career. I would love to talk about that just for a question or two about what your journey to pursue marine biology looked like. I know that you're based out of California now. Were you based out of California during your schooling for your technical schooling for marine science?
I studied biology and Spanish as an undergrad in Indiana, far from the
Mhm.
ocean, but explored all of the waters of the Midwest as a college student. So it was always about the water. Then I went on to a master's degree at Duke University in natural resources economics and policy, more of that side of things. Spent a lot of time at the Marine Lab on the coast, and then out to the desert, University of Arizona, for my PhD in
Me too.
evolutionary biology. All right, it's kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
To And I spent a lot of time in Mexico, crossing the border and going to the ocean in the Sea of Cortez, the Gulf of California. So those are some of the nuts and bolts of my academic journey. Um, but I think the insight that I would share with people who are embarking on or in the midst of or figuring out their academic journey would be that, well, when I was in school, we were told to leave those personal motivating stories about our passion. We're told to check that at the door, that really didn't have a place. It really was irrelevant. And what I find, like you, that is what's driving all of us. Nothing else. It's not money. It's not fame. It's not glory. It's not force. Um, we overcome lots of challenges to do this work purely because we are so deeply personally, emotionally wired into it. And that doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from somewhere. And the more we understand where it comes from and how to make more of it, the better the world will be,
Mhm.
straight up. So the people who are staying up all night long saving sea turtles are not doing it because um, it's a great salary, or they're not doing it because they're being forced to do it. They're unstoppable for another reason. It's love, really.
Mhm.
But we're not allowed to talk about love as
Yeah.
scientists, as serious people. So we dial that out. And when I speak to students and graduate students formally, when I'm invited by universities to speak to students, that's what we talk about. And the reason why they want to talk about it is because they don't get to talk about it. So I'll give you one example. I went back to Duke and met with a group of master's and PhD students, and we just got together in a room. We went around the room, and everybody shared kind of their core, from the heart. Why are you here? Like, why are you really here? Not because you think there are some big challenges that you would like to contribute to solving, but deeper than that. And everybody went around the room, and there was this cohort of new graduate students. They looked at each other and they said, I didn't know that about these people who I'm spending my life with. I'm in class with them. We're on the ocean together. We're in some cases trusting our lives to each other. They're in the same cohort. They're going through it together, and they didn't know this about each other.
Mhm.
And that would have been a big miss. But we cleared that up by just saying, hey, let's take an hour and go deep into our hearts and really describe why are you sitting in this room.
Yeah.
and and I think that's an important thing to put out there. Don't be shy about what's driving you, because when things get hard and you get denied a grant 5, 6, 7, 8 times in a row, but you know the work is good, the only thing that will keep you going is that deep thing in your heart, in your soul, in your gut. And so that the system can try to squeeze that out of you is a tragedy. And
Mhm.
because that's the thing that will carry you through. Or that, you're on a Turtle Beach late at night and the mosquitoes, or you can swim through the mosquitoes, and you don't even know if there are any beans left back in camp for a late dinner or breakfast, and the work is hard and you're dedicated, and the thing that's going to get you through is that deep grit that comes from the love, um, rather than the fear or the force,
Mhm.
or like a striving for financial gain.
Mhm.
It's something else. And so that's the thing that's always been kind of like the fire in my belly, I guess I
Mhm.
would say. Like I knew that the work I did with sea turtles needed to happen, even though there were no grants to do it, or everybody thought it was too hard. And I knew Blue Mind needed to happen, even though I was 0 for 10 on my first 10 grant proposals. 0 for 10, like that was rough. Um, Made me think, okay, this is a really bad idea, according to my peers, according to the foundations, the agencies. But we kept going because there was something kind of deeper
Yeah.
inside of us that said, this is good to do. Don't stop. So, and that's kind of always. I mean, today is MLK Day, and so I think it's an apt comparison. Social justice and environmental justice follow many of the same paths.
Mhm.
And if the people who really, really had it hard, in the '60s said, "Wow, this is too hard. Let's not do it. There's no money in social justice. Let's quit." The government agencies don't think it's important. Maybe it's not important. Um, wow, the world would be different. But no,
Mhm.
they had that fire, and they put up with serious punishment and hardship
Mhm.
and hate. And here we are today, celebrating the legacy
Mhm.
of one great guy who represents many men and women. So
Mhm.
I think it's similar, in many ways, the environmental justice and social justice movements.
Yeah. I think that also, what you said about um, the in your heart of hearts, your passions driving you. When you connect with that with another person, um, you end up being able to see them from a different light, work better with
Mhm.
them. It humanizes the field in a way that I think we're moving towards a more blended, intersectional way to view marine science. It's now more creative than it was. It's more, there's more niches, and it really benefits everyone to be brave enough to be vulnerable about that story. And I mean, I personally transitioned from an academia-based background to marine conservation media because I believe that it's needed for everyone else. And I think that that story that you just shared about 0 for 10 grants on Blue Mind, that's a story of innovation. Innovators always, what inside that it's needed, but it might take a little bit for others to catch up. And we need people doing that and living in that space before people catch up for us to push for progress in all sectors, in social justice and environmental justice as well. And I mean, was there ever a time where you were talking to your colleagues, maybe your loved ones, and were saying to yourself like, what what are we going to do if we can't, should we give up? Was there ever, I guess, a close call for you?
All the time. Like I would say, I would be lying if I portrayed myself as like just completely solid in that regard. And I don't know about just completely quitting, but the the this financial stress, and when your tanks feel drained, like every single tank that you have available, emotionally, physically, socially, spiritually, or you're financially, that where you feel like you've drained all your tanks, but you still keep going, even at like on your hands and knees, crawling. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to give up, but you question it, and you maybe pause. And we started doing Airbnb with our house to create income, like fortunately, all these other tools that you may be able to use. Like used to be like maybe you get a job as a bartender at night so that you can do the thing you really want to do during the daytime.
Hmm.
um, and you just kind of keep going. And really, I think also check in on like, okay, is this a bad idea? And straight
Hmm.
up, like, am I completely delusional? Am I draining my tanks for no reason? You really want to kind of gut check on that. And that's good to know. Like if you go through those gut checks and learn about your gut, and you learn to trust your gut or not trust it,
Hmm.
when it feels different ways. Um, but the thing that kind of has kept me going is just when at those low points, I'll get an email from someone who say, somebody gave me your book. I read it and it straight up saved my life. And I'm crying. I'm reading the message, and they're not embellishing. They're just like, I was in a bad place. I read your book. I reconnected with my water, and it legitimately saved my life, and or changed my life, got me out of the ditch, or reestablish my relationship with somebody I care about, or help me help my autistic son or daughter, or all these just personal, individual, human experiences. And then you read something like that and you go, okay, this is working.
Hmm.
Or I'll meet somebody and like, I got a blue marble from you 10 years ago and it's still in my pocket, and I keep it in my pocket every day, and it helps me work for the water. I go, wow, that's nuts. Like I didn't know that. And thank you for telling me, because that's like a little bit of fuel for my tank. Um, so those things happen. It's nice to have positive feedback and see results.
Yeah.
To hear you say, wow, Blue Mind has kind of gone big, that makes me feel really good. Like that'll get me through this drive across the desert here.
It
Uh,
has. It
and that
has.
it's not, we've never gotten a grant, 0 grants, and we've never gotten a big corporate sponsor, and we've never gotten a big UN buy-in, but it's sort of an interesting case study of how you create actual change, at a very grassroots level, because the idea itself is that good, is that
Mhm.
useful. It isn't, hey, here's a ton of money, convince people of this thing. It's like, here's the idea, I'm telling you, and then you're going to tell somebody, and they're going to tell somebody, and really has been like that. And that does take a little more time.
Yeah.
Never bought an ad to sell books, never paid advertising, or and not saying that that's bad. I'm sure that's a great way to get the word
Mhm.
out, but haven't had the resources to do that. And um, it's become Blue Mind is becoming common knowledge, and I think that is even stronger than policy, um,
Yeah.
and less malleable and less changeable when something becomes common knowledge. Like when you know about your blue mind and you don't even know how you know about it, but you know, and it's important and you get it. And I know that you know, and you know that I know. We're starting our conversation here rather
Mhm.
than down here. And that's the power of common knowledge. And I
Well,
think it supersedes laws and policy, really.
I think that also one of the reasons why it's been so successfully moving through in a grassroots way is because it's it's immediately confirmed on a personal level if you just do it. So, um, I I think that you don't have to necessarily be underwater every day, but people can immediately relate to feelings of calmness, feelings of peace when they're near any form of water. And I guess for those listening that may have never heard of the blue mind theory, can we break it down really briefly as to, I guess, yeah, what your 30-second to a minute overview would
Yeah.
be if people have never heard of it?
Yeah. Well, so yeah, blue mind is just a phrase, two words that describes the, I would say, universal feeling that we get, we humans, but may even go beyond humans, by the way, side note, um,
Wow.
when we're near, in, on, or underwater. So it's the feeling you get. It's a calm, more focused, more centered, sometimes more compassionate, for some people more creative, all
More
these C
present.
words, more
Yeah.
present, um, more coherent, more content, another word for happiness. When you're mindfully by the water. You know, when the water is coming flooding into your basement, that's not blue mind, or coming through your ceiling, or like wiping your town away. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about water that you want to be near, or in.
Hmm.
And as water-based organisms, which we are biologically on a water-based planet, which is where we live, this makes perfect sense evolutionarily, physiologically, and psychologically. And so blue mind is the word that describes this complex set of emotions, but also the field of research and practical applications of that research,
Hmm.
in many realms, from therapeutic purposes, um, to just enhancing your creativity. There are musicians who practice blue mind and swear it gives them their creativity. Pharrell Williams, Beyonce, to name a few. There are elite athletes who practice blue mind, and they say it gets them back in the game. When they've had a bad stretch, they go to the ocean, they get on their boat, or they go for a swim, and then they come back reset, or they go
Hmm.
for a float in a float tank. Um, and I'm not just talking about surfers and divers, but basketball players who swear by it. And so there are lots of applications, therapeutic applications, but sort of day-to-day functional performance-based applications. There are applications to interior designs, exterior designs, public space design. Um,
Oh, I haven't thought
there,
of it that way.
yeah, yeah. Blue Mind informs the way you lay out your community, the way you lay out your living space, your office.
Mhm.
You can enhance well-being, workplace well-being, and productivity by bringing a blue mind sensibility to your design.
Mm.
Um, Obviously, everybody can't work by the ocean, but you can bring ocean elements or water elements, like you have done right behind you there.
Yeah,
For
an
those
aquarium.
listening, there's an
in
aquarium in the room,
the
and
workroom so that when we need a second, we can just go look at what they're up to. Yeah.
right, and that works. And I think you understand, and listeners will understand that a photograph of an ocean is not a straight replacement for the ocean, and
Right.
an aquarium is not a replacement for a lake. So there's not a digital replacement for the great outdoors. We're not advocating for that, but it is one of the tools in our toolkit for
Right.
Blue Mind. There are lots of ways we can bring it into everyday life. It isn't just about waiting for your vacation or your weekend, when you can get away. Yeah.
Yeah. I we spoke last month, for those listening, about ways to bring Blue Mind to more people, and since then I've been doing this Blue Mind challenge where I live near the water. I'm very lucky to do so on the island of Oahu, and I've been going to the ocean in, on, or near the water every day for the entire month of January is the challenge. And so I guess we're on day 16, and what I've learned in this, I Blue Mind resonated with me the first time I heard about it, but I was confronted with, well, was I was actually practicing it? And so this challenge was to teach me what practicing could do for me. And what I have learned so far, even in just 16 days, is the effects are nearly immediate for me. And on the days when it's the hardest to go, are the days that it's the most relieving and also the most essential for me to go. And so there's been a handful of days where I just am out of time and I'm just driving up to a boat ramp at night, and just getting outside and sitting by the water for 10 minutes because that's all I have. And even that is like been so transformational for me. And like I've had hectic work weeks in the last week planning events and things like that. And I'm realizing that this is now a tool that I understand on a personal level to, you know, it can just be 5 minutes. If I can have 5 minutes, that's I can go. It doesn't have to be during the day. It doesn't have to be underwater. I used to think I needed to go surfing or diving to access it. And really at the end of the day, on some days I just need to hear the waves. And I have learned so much about my own Blue Mind relationship with Blue Mind in these past 2 weeks. And I can understand that it's probably individual for every person, about what works and what doesn't work. And, I have access to seawater where I live, but for those that might want to do a challenge like that, or access other types, I know you call that wild water. What are some other types of ways to tap into the to Blue Mind, if you maybe live 45 minutes, or you're where you are, you're in the Mojave Desert and it's not near you right now?
Well, so first, I want to say your personal experience, how beautiful that story is, and you're halfway through, and you basically summarized the entire book through the lens of your personal experience.
Mhm.
And not only that, you've summarized all of the research. Like what you just said painted a beautiful personal picture of the body of research on Blue Mind, which says that you should do it wherever you are and do it regularly. And even if it's just 5 minutes, do that. It doesn't have to be a surf or a dive or an epic journey. Just go do something. And also, what the research says that you just said is that when you need it most, the needle moves the furthest. So the people who need Blue Mind the most are the ones we see experience the greatest benefit. And so on the days where you feel like you need it most, you feel the needle move the most, right?
Yeah.
That's a powerful insight just to know for yourself. But your question, so there is wild water. That's the lakes, the rivers, the oceans, the creeks, the rain, the clouds, the ice, the snow, the fog. That's all water in all of its states in its wild form. But then there's domestic water, and that's the water that's in the tubes and the tanks and the tubs and the cisterns. So any water that's coming through sort of management into our lives and then back out. So in your bathroom, in a pool, in a spa, in a hot tub, in a shower, a hose, that's domestic water. And that is very appealing therapeutically. And it's not the same as wild water. It's different, but also useful. Another category is virtual water, and virtual water is not VR headsets, but it's any place water is depicted where water is not physically present. So that could be artwork, a song, a poem, a photograph, a film, any written or recorded version of the water. If you take your smartphone and open the voice memo recording app and record the surf, the waves, the creek, the rain, and then listen to that later when you can't be at the water, that's the
Oh,
virtual water. So you can, it makes Blue Mind portable, right? It makes that feeling of awe and wonder and calmness portable. So virtual water is artistic representations of water. Um, and then there's this other category I call urban water, and that might be the fountains in your city or your town, the urban waterfronts. So the built environment, it's not wild water, but it's not entirely domesticated. So it's kind of in the city and it's public space. And so water that's moving through and around the city or your town. So sitting by the fountain or sitting at the waterfront downtown at a work when you take a break or a lunch break from work and you can go outside and sit by the water. That's urban water. And that's very accessible to people who may not have access to, wild, pristine lakes, rivers, oceans. And then the last category, which is the most ubiquitous, is imaginary water. So when you're sitting in a crowded room and you can close your eyes and think about what you did last week underwater, and it transports you there. It's not a substitute, but it's your memory, it's your incredible brain at work, your imagination, your memory, your creativity, your ability to close your eyes and almost feel the water all over your body and hear it and taste it and smell it. And we love telling water stories to each other and taking our friends on those journeys verbally in our imaginations, right? So that's good storytelling. So
mhm.
stories about water and even on a personal level, being able to close your eyes and transport yourself there in your memory, in your imagination. And so that's imaginary water. So those are the 5 forms of water. And at any point in any place, at any time in your life, any time of day, you can access your blue mind. So sometimes I hear from people, well, I live in Arizona. I live in the Mojave Desert. I live in Oklahoma. I live far away from the ocean. We don't have much water. What do I do? Well, no problem. We got you covered. Let's talk through this in your life. So maybe the ocean is on your list, but it's maybe a once in a lifetime or a once a year kind of thing. But there are probably some lakes or rivers. There's probably some water in your house. Maybe there's some water um, that you can use therapeutically in your community. And so let's make your list and create your blue scription for your life. So it gets very personal. And I love going through that process with people and helping them kind of realize that there isn't a scarcity of blue mind. It's kind of on each of us to figure out our own blue scription. And then your example is so strong. Then do it. Make it a priority. Do it every day for a month or for a week or whatever you feel like can get you started. And then you build those new habits. And then you start thinking when you're a little stressed, one of your go-to responses is, how do I get a little blue mind? Because I know that works. Because I practiced it for a month and I know that stuff works.
Yeah.
And so you start building a practice. And wherever you are in the world, including here in the Mojave Desert, I think you could put it into good use. Yeah.
I mean, I love that you broke down all those examples because I think that at least folks can relate to at least one of those. Like, say you work in person at an office, you can choose to have a different place where you have your lunch. You can go sit by the fountain instead of indoors. And those types of easy things can make your life so much more peaceful. It could change your productivity for the whole rest of the day. And I think that I really actually love that Blue Mind becomes tailored to the needs of each individual, because then it's actually up to you to figure out your own personal story. And then we have this beautiful mosaic of different ways to access the benefits of water. One question that came up for me that I actually couldn't find the answer to is you obviously have a background in science and academia and research and protected species. What was the bridge to something that's more focused in psychology and like mindset and that type? Was it a mentor? Was it a paper that you read? Or was it simply just gut intuition?
I kind of a combination of all those things. I deeply involved in ocean conservation, endangered species, plastic pollution, marine protected area, you name it, just sort of, neck deep in the work of ocean conservation. And always noticed, well, two things. I was noticing there was a lot of gloom and doom,
Yeah.
and that scaring people was not working. And it like, you can scare people and you can make them run about 30 feet, and then they get tired and they get cramped, and then they stop, and then they get sore, and then you have to scare them again. They maybe run 20 feet, and maybe they jump. Then you scare them again, and now they're kind of fatigued and they can only run 10 feet. But if you motivate people through love, you can't stop them. They'll run around the world twice without without breathing. um, and so I was noticing that there was a lot of gloom and doom, a lot of fear-based communication, and also noticed that whenever I was at the water, I felt better, and that whenever my colleagues were at the water, they felt better. And so I went looking for research on the neuropsychology of our relationship with water, like I was reading kind of on the side about music-based therapy. Your brain on music was an emerging theme that I was familiar with from some previous work. And so I wanted to read a book about your brain on water, and then I wanted to apply it to the problem solving I was engaged in. And I couldn't find the book that I wanted to read, and tried to convince some people that they should write it so that, I could read it and share it with my colleagues. And I failed to convince anybody that they should write it. But I pitched it to a guy named Dr. Oliver Sacks. He was a late great neurologist, water lover, beautiful writer, incredible intellect, neurologist, expert on the brain and behavior and clinical disorders, and just a fascinating mentor of a guy. And, importantly, a water lover and a music lover, lifelong water lover. And I pitched the idea to him. I really thought it would be great if he wrote this book that I had in mind. And then I would help, and then I could read it, and then I could use it. And this is the kind of hinge point of the story. He said, "It's a fine idea. You do it." And I remember that just landed like, it wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't a nudge. It wasn't just like, it wasn't a dismissal. It was a mandate, like a command.
Yeah.
And basically all I could think in, my brain just said, I probably said it out loud, "Yes, sir."
Yeah.
And 5 years later, I brought a book called Blue Mind to him in New York, signed it, and a year later he passed away. But that's how it happened. So I didn't set out to write a book about the brain or human behavior in water, the neuropsychology and water. I set out to read it, and just it ended up being that I had to write it before I could read it, and that took 5 years. And so 5 years to write it, and then it'd been 9 years since it was published. So these things take time, right? And all with kind of a headwind from my colleagues saying, "You're committing career suicide. You should keep doing the work you were doing. You got grants for that. You're not getting any grants for this." You know, the eyeball rolling, and but here we are talking about it. And so thanks to Oliver Sacks, I would say, that
Wow.
this conversation exists.
Isn't it
Mm.
beautiful that you just need really one person to believe in you and your idea for you to say, oh, that's all I really needed. I knew it inside. I just needed
Yeah.
maybe someone I trusted or looked up to also see it the way I see it.
Yeah. And what's beautiful about that is when you think that's maybe sometimes that's your job in the
Mm,
lives of others who
of
have an
course.
idea and they tell you their idea, and maybe they're not getting traction, but you listen and help them find the core value in the concept.
Mhm.
Um and that's a mentoring role, that can be as simple as listening, affirming, encouraging. It doesn't have to be a multi-year. In the case of Oliver Sacks, he said that, and then 5 years later, I delivered the book. It wasn't
Yeah.
like it was a hand holding process. Um,
It's like
but
6 words. He said 6 words to you, and then you wrote the book.
yeah, exactly. The
Uh,
power of 6 words. Maybe that's
yeah.
another book someday. Is a
Well, I too am a ocean conservationist, in all forms of the word, but I believe that I have a question before we get into our last question, which is, do you believe that us, I guess, as communicators or conservationists, need to tie issues facing our ocean, challenges facing our ocean, back to the personal level to get the larger demographic to care? Um, because when I was younger, earlier in my career, it felt like I would discuss a challenge and people would recognize it was bad, say it was an oil spill, but there's something maybe a little bit different when it hits home on your backyard or your beach or something like that. And so, what is your opinion on tailoring communication to be a personal impact?
well, I think there's a lot of diversity within these approaches, and that there isn't one recipe that describes how to do it.
Mm.
So if you're working to try to change corporate practices, that might look a little bit different than, say, working with a community of fishers to adjust, among say 100 people in a rural fishing community. That will look different, necessarily different. If you're really working hard to create a policy solution, that will look different than creating a technical solution that needs innovation and research. So it's kind of an all of the above. I don't think you can really go wrong, um, by understanding the science of human behavior in all of those realms. And I think you can really go off the rails if you don't understand the science of human behavior. So, a simple way of putting that is that conservation work or social change work is human behavior change. It isn't turtle behavior change. It isn't changing the climate like magically. It's saying, hey, climate, you need to change. It is human behavior change. So if you don't understand human behavior, the chances that you will succeed at that endeavor drop precipitously. If you have an organization and nobody on your board or your staff, has insight into human behavior, the drivers, and the function of human behavior, even the neurophysiology of human behavior, your chances of being successful drop tremendously. So I think that's probably the core of the answer. Um, and it turns out we are hardwired as human beings through hundreds of thousands of years to connect with each other, connect with our surroundings very personally, emotionally, and connect with powerful storytelling, because it kept us alive for a very long time. We didn't have paper or pencils or smartphones or internet or recording devices or even musical instruments, very simple musical instruments, for most of human history. But we had our stories. So the ability to transmit a story to one another clearly, effectively, that contained information about whether you're going to live or die, and make that story stick and go viral. They didn't say that back then, but that's how it worked. That was a matter of life and death. And so that's why storytelling is so important now for modern humans. It's been exploited to sell sugar water, like a powerful story about Mean Joe Green giving his jersey to a kid, and the kid gives him a Coke. Like, this is a classic Coke commercial. That was a cool story. It was like, it got you in the heart. And they used that emotional storytelling to sell you addictive sugar water. All right. So what if we use emotional storytelling to, quote unquote, sell like saving the ocean?
Exactly.
Well, that's a good idea. Really good idea, I think.
I think so too.
Yeah, wherever we are, in whatever format, whether you're in a corporate meeting or a UN meeting or a small town fishing community meeting, or around the table with your family, the ability to tell a personal, resonant, authentic, and I'm going to say, leave the bullshit out. Just tell a really clear story. Make sure it's authentic. Make sure you're not faking it, because people can tell when you're faking it, whether they it's like the subconscious micro emotional response to a fake story. So find it within you and share that. And people may not care about the ocean, but if they care about you, they'll care about the ocean because they care about you, because they love you. And so that's a big piece of it too. If you're a lovable, likable, kind person, people might just say, hey, I don't care about turtles the way you do. You're a sea turtle freak. I'm just kind of not that into it, but I like you, so I think I'll do the thing that will help save turtles because I think you're pretty cool. So that's part of it as well.
That's a beautiful
Yeah.
message, because I think it's also a direction that's being carved out right now in ocean science and conservation, is how are you telling stories? How are you raising the platform for voices and things like that?
Definitely.
Our last question, which is what I ask every single guest, is if you could say one thing to, the most powerful people in the world, or put something on a billboard where every single person would see it, what would that message be?
Well, I when I wrote Blue Mind, I got to the end of it, and I remember the day, the moment exactly, sitting on a couch. I'd written 300 words, and I wrote at the top of the page, all I really want to say is this, ... And then I sat there and I was like, okay, what? A lot of research, many years to write this thing, and I'm down to the last few words. And I wrote, get in the water. And I'm gonna stand by that. And that could mean get near the water, as you said earlier. You might just be going to the edge of the water. But we'll just go with get in the water, get near the water. Just do that. Take somebody with you who needs it. Maybe it's easy. Maybe it's your practice daily, but you probably know somebody who's stuck. So take them with you to the water and help them get unstuck. Maybe it could save their life, could make their day a little better or a lot better. It could ripple out from there. And it sounds overly simplistic, but as you've shown so clearly through your personal challenge, you're learning so much. You're a dedicated ocean person, and through this last 2 weeks, you're learning deep things about the ocean and yourself. Right? And people might think you already knew everything, but here you are having these important, profound, insightful moments that you're able to share with your peers, with everybody you meet off into the future. So it seems really simplistic, but I think if people just take the time daily to connect with their water in all of its forms, and then talk about it and share it and take others with them. So that would be my message. If I had a billboard, it would say, get in the water. And then hashtag Blue Mind, and people would say, what the heck is that? And maybe they become curious about it. Yeah.
And then they'll look it up. Oh, thank you so much, Jay, for coming on and
My pleasure.
sharing. all of your stories were, I learned so much that I don't think was in the book. And I'm grateful for that.
Likewise. Yeah. I
Yeah.
learned so much from you as well. So
I hope you have
awesome.
a beautiful rest of your road trip, and
Yeah.
we'll be in touch. Yeah. Have a
Yes.
wonderful day.
Excellent. All right. Thank you. Take good
Bye.
care.